This is Sir Leo the Third, your friendly neighborhood mod, and we will be talking about contested actions in this next part of our video series. So, contested actions are quite simply when two or more parties are doing actions that are in direct conflict with each other. There's no way for both or for all parties to win. Only one is going to actually accomplish whatever it is that they're trying to do. So, the way that this is done is very simple. Um, both players will just roll their actions, and whichever one wins um, will accomplish their goal, whichever one gets higher successes. So in the case of a tie, you just keep going. Now these are going to be used in relatively quick actions, things like wrestling over a fallen gun or a quick sprint. Um, in the Another thing to be aware of, though, although both of these are going to be
User entered
both
your
parties
channel.
attempting to do the exact same thing, sometimes the parties aren't going to be doing the same thing, but they're still in opposition to each other. The easiest example of this one is going to be stealth rolls, which I'll get into a little bit more later. So the other type of contest actions are extended contest actions, where you mix the rules for both of them together. So, like a extended action, it's the you come up with a certain number of successes that are needed to accomplish the goal, and then like a contest action, first one to get to that point wins. So this could be something like a longer drawn out race. A good example of this, kind of using that more in depth system that I talked about last video, where you actually divide it up into different things, is something like a rooftop race, where
User
they
entered your
have to
channel.
get from
User
rooftop
in
to
your channel
rooftop, so
timed
you have
out.
some jumps in there, and then the something happens on the roof, and so you have to deal with that, and so you can actually do a whole storytelling thing just from trying to get from rooftop to rooftop. um, but it could also be something simple like an arm wrestling contest, which is the example I'm actually going to use later. So I actually slipped something in there earlier where I was talking about the gun, wrestling over a gun, and the rolls I used for it were as strength plus dexterity. If you notice, neither one of those is a skill. Those are both attributes. And although the most common check in this system is going to be a skills check, where it's one attribute plus one skill plus modifiers, sometimes there's not really a skill for something, and sometimes it doesn't even really make sense for there to be a skill. So for something like wrestling over a gun, it doesn't really make sense for there to be a skill for that. That's not really something you can hone to get better at. It's just your raw natural abilities and the things that you've trained your body to do. Um, so there is no really expertise on this. Um, so when you're doing that, you use a primary skill or a primary attribute and a secondary attribute. So the primary attribute is strength for wrestling over a gun, and which is fairly obvious, but the reason I use dexterity is because dexterity is your hand-eye coordination and your flexibility, both of which are going to be important there. So that's how I'd kind of do the basis for that. But a good thing to be aware of is that this system is really flexible, and so I could see a player making or writing up their response for how they plan on getting the gun, and it being well written and describing their character attempting to think through the problem as opposed to just wrestling over it, just grabbing as hard as they can and actually coming up with something. And in that case, I might use strength, still the same primary attribute, but I might let them use their wits as opposed to their dexterity. So you can kind of, this is one of those cases where good RP will let you, good just role playing, just the actual getting into your character and writing up good, well written posts can actually give you things that will help you out in the actual game. So um, I mentioned stealth earlier, and so stealth is going to be a dexterity plus stealth check to get past somebody. But if that person's actively looking for you, you're now in a contested action, and the other action is obviously not going to be another stealth check. What it's going to be is a perception check, and perception in this system is going to be wits plus composure. So you're going to roll your dexterity plus your stealth, which you're going to modify by the surrounding area. So if it's a dry day in the fall, there's a lot of twigs and leaves on the ground. There's a good chance that you're going to step on something that's going to make some noise. We can give you a modifier for that, or there's a lot of cover, so we can actually give you a bonus for that and things like that. But the other person is going to be rolling their wits plus their composure in order to overcome yours, and whoever gets the highest rolls are going to win. And although you don't, and when you're modifying the wits plus composure, it's not necessarily something that's going to modify their wits or their composure. It can just be anything that has to do with their senses. So if the person is wearing earbuds or is deaf or something, they're not going to hear those twigs snap that I was talking about earlier. So not only would I not give the person doing the stealth the negative roll for that, I would actually give the person attempting to do the perception check a negative roll, or a negative 1 dice probably, just to deal with the fact that they're not going to hear if the other person messes up. They have to see it. All right, so for my example, I'm going to do an arm wrestling contest, like I mentioned. And for an arm wrestling contest, it's going to be obviously strength. And the other attribute I'm going to use is stamina, because it's not really going to be a matter of your ability, your hand-eye coordination or anything like that. It's just your ability to resist the other person while also pushing yourself. So I'm going to use my 2 strongest characters. So that's going to be Drasilia, who has a total of 7 points, 4 strength, 3 stamina, and V, who has a total of 8 points, 4 strength, 4 stamina. So I'm going to go to the Roll-Z website, which, as you can see, looks different. It's the same. It's everything's the same. Don't worry for our intents and purposes. Don't worry about it. So we're gonna start with Drasilia. So that's 7 dice. M8 is the dice code that we use, and so she rolls, and then V rolls. So round 1, no one gets anywhere. So you talk about that, both arms flex, but the there's no movement for the first little while. A good thing to be aware of. Okay, so I actually skipped ahead a little bit. This is an extended contested action. I'm going to set the number they need to get to at 5. So right now neither has gotten any successes, but whoever is the first to get to 5 successes wins. And each 2 rolls like this is going to be 1 round. So that also gives you a good idea of the length, how long it takes this action to actually take. A good thing to be aware of, though, here is, especially in something like this where it's a real simple action, you don't need to keep into the round structure and give let each player respond to you before continuing. They can just you can just keep going until one person wins, and then use what happens here as your description of how it actually goes. So right now they're both still locked up in combat. So let's have Drasilia go next. She wins. Drasilia wins. Now, Drasilia got 6 successes with 7 die. I always like seeing how that actually plays out. There we go. Wow, she rolled 2 10s. That helped. A 4 and a 3, and yeah. So, that's how she that's how she won. Um, but that right there is basically it. Now you might be wondering why I didn't start with V first, and it wasn't just because I came to Drasilia before I came to V. Because if I let V roll, she also wins. So the order here does matter. And for something like this, which is essentially combat, I'm just going to use the initiative. And Drasilia's initiative is higher. She has a 7 initiative, 4 composure, 3 dexterity, while V has 3 dexterity, 2 composure, so 5. And so your thing there does matter, but if this was not a physical contest but was something else, I might actually do something different um, for initiative than dexterity composure. Dexterity composure is going to be for physical stuff, and a good way of doing that would be like um, if it's a mental thing, you might use wits instead of dexterity, or if it's social, you might use manipulation instead of dexterity. I'd probably keep composure no matter what, but I could theoretically see some instance where I wouldn't use composure, but honestly, those would be really far in between. So depending on the type of combat would depend on how I run initiative for it, but it's not for this one. It's just physical, so it's the same as your normal combat initiative. All right, I think that's about it.